It's just religion. It's just religion.
Hello and welcome to RS in 5 or Less, dispelling the myth that ignorance is bliss. Today we're having a look at the account of Jesus' healing of the woman with the hemorrhage in Mark chapter 5. And a loud crowd followed him and pressed in on him. Now there was a woman who had been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years. She had endured much under many doctors and had spent all that she had, and she was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, for she said, "If I but touch his clothes, I will be made well." Immediately her hemorrhage stopped, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. Immediately aware that power had gone forth from him, Jesus turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing in on you? How can you say, 'Who touched me?'" He looked all around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, fell down before him, and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." Jesus is on the way to the healing of Jairus' daughter. Because Jairus was the leader of the synagogue, his daughter being unwell and Jesus perhaps raising her from the dead caused a large crowd to follow along. One of the people in this crowd was this woman who had the hemorrhage. Just so we're clear, a hemorrhage is a persistent bleed that is potentially life-threatening. Now in those days, a woman with a hemorrhage would have been ceremonially unclean. She wouldn't have been able to live a normal life. She wouldn't have been able to attend the temple to worship. For an extension, research the rules and practices from the book of Leviticus about being ceremonially unclean. While some of the accounts of healings in Mark's Gospel can be interpreted as metaphorical, the note that she has suffered much under many physicians and yet has grown no better, in fact has gotten worse, points to the fact that this is a physical ailment that is afflicting her. As part of this huge crowd gathering around Jesus, this woman says to herself, it seems, "If I could just touch the hem of his garment, then I would be made clean." In doing so, she demonstrates her faith. This faith might have come out of desperation. She has literally nowhere else to turn. This faith may have been growing for some time. She may have heard about the things that Jesus has done in the past. Or perhaps rumor has reached her that Jesus is on the way to heal Jairus' daughter. She does it secretly. She does it hoping that he won't find out. When he says, "Power has gone out from me," you can almost hear the surprise in his voice. Most of the healings we read about in Mark's Gospel have Jesus as the instigator. This one has it the other way around. In this account, the woman initiates the healing, receives the physical healing, and Jesus is surprised by this. True to their form, the disciples ask the obvious question. When Jesus says, "Who touched me?" the disciples effectively say, "Look at the crowd, everybody touched you." But Jesus knows that something has happened, and the woman approaches Jesus in fear and trembling, perhaps feeling guilty, and tells him the whole story, to which Jesus replies, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." This final sentence, coming immediately after it says she told him the whole truth, tells us a lot about this passage and the nature of faith. Christ's response to her is to call her daughter. Christ is welcoming her into the family of God. When he says "go in peace," he's referring to the Jewish concept of shalom. This is not the absence of conflict, it is the presence of wholeness. She is made well, she is made whole. She is free of her disease, yes, but she is also free of the social stigma of her disease. She can return to her family, she can return to the temple, because it is her faith that has made her well. Some questions to consider. Let me know your thoughts about these in the comments. Which do you think is the most important message of this passage? Faith or physical healing? Was it Christ's power or the woman's faith that made her well? Why do you think the woman approached Jesus with fear and trembling after she had received her healing? And for believers today, what, if any, should be the tension between faith for physical healing and modern medicine?